We think of politics as being left and right, but what if the larger clashes are actually happening within those bases themselves? Across the conservative base and the liberal base, internal fault lines are tearing apart what was once very solid coalitions. Today, we are diving into those civil wars within the bases, what's driving them, how they're playing out, and why it matters to all of us. Let's dig in. But first, my name is Antoinette Chanel. Welcome to my channel, where I basically watch the world and then report on it in my own commentary. On the conservative side here in the United States, the base is very fractured. The dominant message used to be smaller government, strong national defense, and traditional values. But those categories themselves have split. Researchers at the Pew Center for Research have identified a few different factions within the GOP. And if you're not familiar with what GOP means, that stands for Grand Ole Party. It's a nickname the Republican Party has had for at least the last 4 decades. So you've got core conservatives, then country first conservatives, America first type people, market skeptic conservatives, and new era enterprisers. And they specifically identify that the fight is between the establishment conservative wing and the insurgent populist wing tied to Donald Trump, so the old-timey conservatives versus the newer MAGA conservatives, between libertarian-style free market believers and nationalist protectionists, between social traditionalists and more secular, culturally focused conservatives. This means that the base is no longer unified because we can't really tell clearly what policies they want or what identity they hold. The answer, if you were to ask them, is going to be different and contested because they are not consistent. And so the consequence of this is that the central focus of the party will then shift. Leadership becomes punished or replaced, loyalty is tested in the primaries, and strategic coherence suffers. All of this internal conflict weakens the conservative base's ability to act as a cohesive force. And this then opens the space for surprise moves, for instability, and for shifting alliances. On the liberal side, the coalition is even messier. The modern liberal base is composed of urban professionals, as well as working class voters, racial minorities, activists, progressives, and moderates. It is a very wide umbrella. This diversity means there is more internal tension. Why? Because different visions for what should be priorities and what should be central concerns of the party are going to differ, and those people are going to clash. Different priorities, different tactics, different visions for what change can look like. And so the diversity creates these battle lines, and this is according to the Arab American Institute. I'll make sure that links are in the description for all of the articles that I am referencing. But the battle lines for the liberal side are progressives, people like AOC who are pushing for systemic change, versus moderates who prioritize electoral pragmatism and incremental reform. So we're looking at younger people like AOC versus older people like Nancy Pelosi who really want to keep the status quo as it is because they have special interests in that. Nancy Pelosi has made a lot of money through her career in Congress, and I've covered that in a previous video as well. There is also a battle over the class divide, professionals in the knowledge economy versus working class voters who feel left behind. There are also tensions over identity politics versus economic populism, and the result of this is that there are frequent public disputes, open primaries, volunteer and donor frustration with leadership, and a base that sometimes seems more focused on internal purity tests than external cooperation. These internal struggles hamper unified messaging, as well as slow progress on policies, and create a perception of disarray. Though the content differs, the underlying structural issues are the same for the internal struggles that both of these parties are having. Digital media amplifies factional voices, rewarding conflict and visibility over consensus. The base in each party is increasingly demanding loyalty and purity. If you have the audacity to stray, to think differently, to believe differently, then there is an internal force that will deal with you. And it comes from within. The calls are coming from inside the house. Ideology becomes identity, and identity overrides any coalition building. As one Oxford academic piece outlines, ideological and affective polarization has transformed party bases into us versus them communities where internal dissent is treated as betrayal. And so the consequence there is that these internal civil wars that are happening within these two party bases, those often affect their ability to be effective in the work that the parties are supposed to do. It becomes harder for people to see eye to eye. It becomes harder for people to get on the same page. And on the larger level where like people like me and you are sitting, it becomes difficult for anybody to govern because there's just so much infighting. These internal battles are not just curiosities, but they have real lasting effects, some of which we've already talked about. So number one is that we have policy paralysis. Whenever there are factions of people fighting back and forth, it stalls policy development, and that is bad for everyone, obviously. We also have a significant issue with voter fatigue in this country. People just get turned off altogether when their side can't seem to get it together and act right, and when it feels like there's just nothing but corruption all around. There's a lot of work of distracting and distraction that's happening as well within these internal battles that both Democrats and Republicans are suffering from. And so a lot of times what we see is mudslinging back and forth between the sides because the opponents want to call out how the other people are not being consistent or they're not on the up and up and this, that, and the third. But it really is just mudslinging because behind all of that is a lot of internal back and forth and bickering to the point that even pointing out something that is relevant, that would be a pertinent observation to make about how one side can't seem to get their messaging in line with their actions. I mean, even that doesn't have much value because the base that was supposed to be supporting this argument, supposed to be focused on this, they're too busy picking each other apart because of what a photo shoot looked like or what ethnicity someone's spouse might be. And if the bases are fighting themselves, then who controls the narrative? Who leads the movement? Who builds the future? If these internal civil conflicts are to be resolved, there are a couple of things that both sides will need to consider as they move towards this reconciliation. Number one, they would need to reprioritize coalition over purity. So rather than looking at someone and questioning whether or not they are even worthy of being part of the Democratic Party or worthy of being part of the Republican Party, instead just look at, okay, do we have the main talking points in common? Are we on the same page when it comes to the common denominator, when it comes to this political stuff? If we can't even do that, I don't really see how we're supposed to move forward. Number two, both parties have to work on reconnecting to their structural goals. So not just fighting culture wars, but actually building a policy base. That's one thing that I will say about politics of this modern age in the 2020s versus what I saw happening in the 90s when I was a kid, when my parents were the ones who were voting. But it seemed like there was much more tangible policy that people were running on, whereas these days it really just feels like people are running on vibes. Number three, promote internal accountability rather than internal purge. So rather than this whole, okay, well, you did something we didn't like, you said something we didn't like, and so now we're gonna excommunicate you, you're canceled, that's the end. Can we maybe come up with a system of accountability where people can possibly be rehabilitated? And I know that that's probably gonna be like a triggering point for some people because I know some people believe that some folks can't be rehabilitated. And you're probably right, you know, some of the most cruel and demented serial killers, those people cannot be rehabilitated. Some of the most hateful, genocidal, pro-genocide political figures that we have seen through history, they probably can't be rehabilitated either. But the witch hunts, I feel like that is taking us backwards. It feels more like the 1920s than it does the 2020s. Number 4, to foster cross-faction dialogue. This is about building respect. The idea that you can listen to someone speak, even if they're saying things you don't agree with, and be respectful about it. The idea that we don't tear a person down personally just because they made a choice that was different from what we would choose. I know that today's modern media makes it seem like your politics are your character. And that's because the systems that be have made it such. But truthfully, your character is separate from your political beliefs. Or at least that's the way it used to be. And number 5, focus on external issues rather than internal warfare. Right now, the greatest threats that are facing American people, or just people on the planet of Earth in general, they are much bigger than what somebody's spouse looks like, how a photo shoot came together. They're much bigger than all of that. We have an active climate crisis that is showing us in real time just how sick the earth is. I live in Denver. Denver is a city that normally gets snow through late fall and the winter time. So that means around November, snow's falling on the ground, and it consistently falls until about March, April sometime. You might get that stray snowstorm that comes through in May, which is why you don't put anything in the ground here in Denver if you're going to do a garden until after Mother's Day. But for the most part, this is a place where it snows. It was 71 degrees on Christmas Day, and I think we've only had 2 actual snows since the fall season started in 2025. So what that means is an area that historically tends to be pretty cold at this time of year has been very, very warm. And that's just one anecdotal example. We also have large disparities of inequality in this country that are becoming difficult to ignore as well as sustain. We need solutions for this. You remember Theodore Roosevelt and the square deal, and then FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and the New Deal? Those are the kinds of things that we need right now so that working people can have their needs represented, so that they can get a more fair shake economically, because if we don't give them that, then we're all doomed to suffer. If you don't see how we are all interconnected in this economic jungle that we're existing in, please do us all a favor and educate yourself in 2026. So to conclude, the civil wars that are happening between these 2 political parties in the American political system, they are indication of where we are. It shows the division and the dysfunction that is very prevalent in the United States right now. We are in our flop era. They show us that even when we think that we're on the same side, we might actually just be fighting each other. And so a few things that I would like for you to keep in mind as I wrap up this video. Number 1, do not assume that your base is unified. It's a good idea to ask who is winning the internal battles and at what cost. Number 2, if you're part of the movement, recognize when you are spending more time policing your own rather than working on the mission of the movement. And number 3, if you are watching from the outside, recognize that it's not just a battle of them versus us. It's a battle of us versus us. Every day we find more reasons to divide ourselves, and the very powerful people who are really controlling how all of this works, they love that because we are easier to conquer when we are divided. Those are my thoughts. Okay, friends, Happy New Year. Thanks so much for watching this entire video. I really appreciate you. In 2026, I want to make sure that it's very clear to you all that I love bringing you content, but I need some help with getting this content out to other people. So if you like this video, please be sure to share it. Be sure to leave a comment for me. I love getting comments from people, but interacting with this content is really helpful for me on this app. So I appreciate it if you can do that. And like I said, I'd really love to hear from you, your thoughts about what's happening, what you're observing with all of this back and forth that seems to be happening between Democrats, Republicans, liberals versus conservatives, but then also within those bases themselves. I mean, the GOP is the conservatives, then there's the America First people, then there's the MAGA people, then there's the Groyper people. Like, it's just so many factions. Otherwise, friends, I really appreciate you for being here. I'm looking forward to bringing you more content in 2026, and I'll catch up with you in the next video. Bye! You've just watched one of my videos, but did you know there's an entire Antoinetteverse? On my namesake YouTube channel, I dive into current events and share my critical commentary. Over on Instagram, you can keep up with my life as a writer and educational specialist. On the Write Life blog, I explore how reading, writing, and emotional expression help us to grow. And on my Substack, I publish personal essays and sometimes share sneak peeks from my upcoming book. Wherever you join me, thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.